Good afternoon, everyone. We are here with episode 17 of Zero to One. So it still kind of blows my mind that for 17 weeks we've been doing this. When prior to this, it would be every, maybe month or two, or maybe even less than that we'd be getting everyone together. So yeah, really excited to keep that going. Had some fantastic speakers in the recent weeks, and all of those videos are updated. There was a little glitch we had last week with our YouTube, so it took a little bit to get some of the previous videos on there, but they're all available there, so you can always go back and have a look at the previous ones as well. I think what I've been really fascinated about is the different perspectives, different journeys people have been going on. The fact that you can learn a snippet from everybody in that sense, and that's something that we're really proud of as well. And we really appreciate everyone's engagement as well. It's good to see some familiar faces here, and it's good to see new faces as well. So hopefully you'll enjoy the session today. We're really excited to welcome Ruo-Mei with us, who is someone who does it all. But the hardest part is that you may feel like you want to do it all, but you don't necessarily know how to do that and sustain it. And I think that's something that can impact all kinds of or everyone who kind of exists in the community that we work with. Those who are maybe building a business from scratch, those who are going it solo, those who have an ambition to move maybe from a corporate environment into something, or maybe they're doing, like we hear the phrase used a lot these days about a portfolio career or a multi-hyphenated role where you are kind of working on things on the side alongside your full-time or your family commitments as well, because as we know, like that's one of the most, the hardest jobs in the world in that sense as well. So really excited to welcome Ruo-Mei with us today. The way that we're going to do this session, as touched on for those who were joining us a little earlier, is we're going to have an open discussion session. It's going to be a little bit more like a fireside type discussion as well. So please do add in your own comments. If you want to add any questions, feel free to put them in at any time, and we'll open that up very quickly as well. And that way, then we can have this sort of discussion. But I know obviously quite a few of you who are on the call, and I know you've also got your own experiences, so I might pick on you to answer if you don't feel like it. But let's see. So just fair warning that I might sort of might pick you and say it'd be really good to hear if we can draw some relevance to it as well. You can always tell me no, but it'd be nice if you did as well, because obviously we want this to be as interactive as possible. So without further ado, I will hand it to you, Ruo-Mei, and I'll stop sharing the screen as well.
Yeah, hi Jamie, and hi Yasas. Hi everybody, I'm super excited to meet with you. I think Yasas and Jamie had asked me to just introduce myself briefly. I'm going to keep it very brief because as I kept briefing them earlier, I said I would really, really want to get to the candid back and forth conversation to hear our real questions and also your real lived experiences. So multi-directional. Maybe the quickest way to give a sense of, people look at my face, and especially because I'm a little petite, if you meet me in person, it's like, wow, you are, firstly, they actually think I'm younger than I really am. And when I tell them my age, their jaws drop, right? So just a bit of context, I'm into my 17th year of working. So I graduated at the height of the global financial crisis. In Singapore, youth is defined as up to 35 years old officially to receive any government grants. So when I train youth, I have to say I've long graduated from the youth category. But in any case, a quick sense of who I am. I think I've spent the first half, 8-ish years of my career working in government, then an Asian MNC, so that's government linked, private sector, and then charity. So I sampled every kind of other form possible from, you think it, right? Government link, really small SME to charity. And along each way, I collected data points about myself, realized what worked didn't work for me, and I call myself a reluctant entrepreneur. Maybe some of you here might resonate with that. So it was like by elimination, I became an entrepreneur. And over the last 10 years, I have been trying to variously do it all. So a quick way to understand who I am, besides being a mom, I have a toddler-ish who probably thinks he's older than 4 this year. Right? Besides all the different hats I wear, I am, if you're familiar with the various personality styles, MBTI, I'm an ENFJ, so like advocate, teacher, sage, right? So like super zealous. I believe in the best in people. Enneagram, I'm Enneagram 3, right? So the achiever, someone that does things. If you go by Strengths Finder, my top 3 are variously activator, strategic, achiever. So you might probably start to piece this together. And then if you're into horoscopes, which is obviously not scientific, I'm Aries fire. So you put all this together and you're like, oh my gosh, right? When I propose this topic, I'm probably preaching to myself. So just putting it out there. I'm no expert. Yay, high five, Evelina. I'm no expert. I'm still on this journey, but I would love to share my battle scars, my war stories, and to learn from all of you as well. So I'm just going to pause here in terms of this. I don't want to go super long-winded on the self-intro, but just give you a sense of, this person who's not an expert, who's probably on this journey as a fellow sojourner with all of you. So back over to
Love
you,
that.
Jamie, and
No,
would love, yeah.
love that as well. And you're right. I think the journey is ongoing. The learning is every day. There's always a lot we can. I think what's also really interesting. You mentioned obviously you have a toddler of 4. I sort of in a similar age, but my son is 5 now, and yeah, every day is a lesson in that sense, right? Just having to manage a child, negotiate with a child. That's probably the like doing a sales role that I've done in my life, like to be
Oh,
able
yes. Negotiate.
to every day you're negotiating. So you're kind of honing that skill that you could use anywhere else as well in that sense. I
And
think
if I
if you're
could add,
able to,
like,
yeah,
it's managing up and down. I think many of us are probably the sandwich generation. So besides the professional hats that we wear, I think it's like managing our children, but also our parents. I'm
yeah,
sure we're
yeah.
putting them on something every day. So I think that's like all these different hats that we juggle, right, in our lives.
And Ruo-Mei, you spoke about boundaries in the intro that we spoke earlier. How do you kind of draw boundaries between work and personal life, right? We go home and then we have another role to play, or two roles in some cases, right? You are a dad or a mom, or you're also a spouse, a wife, or a husband to someone, but at work we have another role or multiple roles. So how do you kind of draw boundaries between your work life and then your personal life? One reason I also asked this is it's very different today with digital devices coming in, right? Like, I mean, when our parents or parents, grandparents worked, you had a work life and then you had personal life. But we go to our home with a device which carries our work as well, right? So, and then work kind of creeps into your personal life. So maybe we start talking about that as a first thing.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Yasas. And I think that's such an important and a very real struggle I suspect all of us deal with. I think firstly, like you said, tech is both an enabler, but it could also be a shackle, right? So I think many of us are independent doers, as you call it in doer circles. So meaning we're self-employed, we run our own business. And I think I always say that it's something for us to think about. Time autonomy, does it really mean that we are free? Because I always joke with my friends, you see the out of office reminder from people that are employed by others. They can actually delegate, right? If I'm not around, please refer to colleague ABC, and then they're gone, right? But for many of us, chances are we're on holiday or I'm on a retreat right now and I'm checking my phone because there's no one to cover us. Or sometimes internally, we are driven by that sense of responsibility and responsiveness. So honestly, I think boundaries is something that we first have to be comfortable with ourselves. And I think it starts with understanding who we are, right? So a few things. For example, if you are like me, you're the kind that if a message comes in at midnight, and even if you don't respond, you're thinking about it and it interferes with your sleep, so you can't unsee it in your mind, then you actually might just need to put it on flight mode. Or you might even just, like me, sometimes have to say, okay, I saw this, I'll get back to you tomorrow. So that when your mind is like checked, I've responded temporarily as a placeholder, but I'll get back tomorrow. I don't actually have to craft that 10, 15-minute long form response right now. So I think that's first, right? To kind of first understand yourself, like what's your response type? How strong is your bias for action? Because I know some people can compartmentalize very well and just sleep well. But if you're more like me, then we maybe need to put in some preemptive mechanisms in place. And number two, I like to think that everything begins from within, meaning convincing ourselves first that boundaries are not for the weak. Actually, boundaries are protective buffer. That if I go all out now, I'm going to boom and bust cycle, as many entrepreneurs know very well. And then I'm going to be flat on my face for the next few weeks or months, and I'm of no use to anybody else. So that boundaries actually help us last the long haul so we can continue doing what we love, right? And would want to do for a long time. So I try to do that, but honestly, it's easier said than done. So I just tell myself, okay, I just ask myself, does this absolutely need to be done right now? If not, then I try to defer it. But also sometimes it just helps me to shoot off a quick reply and say, hey, I saw this, but I'll get back to you, longer form tomorrow. Yeah, so that's just the way I personally deal with it when it comes to boundaries.
Yeah, I think that's the really good points there about those boundary setting. I think that topic also came up a little bit last week as well, but it was around about managing your value as well and setting the right boundaries.
Can I
Because I think,
add one more thing,
yeah,
sorry, that came to mind?
yeah,
I've just
please, yeah,
spoken more about professional boundaries.
yeah,
Honestly, I think the hardest boundaries for me are emotional boundaries with like in my personal life. I'm not sure if that resonates with some of you. For example, I'm the oldest child and oldest daughter. This as we've spoken about a lot, this firstborn daughter syndrome. And what that means is that growing up, I've just I inadvertently become social organizer in my home. I organize all the birthdays, all the extended family gatherings. Every week, I'm the one suggesting where to go. And that adds, it energizes us, but obviously it also drains from our tank at the same time, all the multiple planning. And I think sometimes boundaries is also allowing ourselves to step back and then allowing others to step up and grow into that role. Because if we are always doing, in a way, we are enabling, and others don't learn to walk when actually they should be walking, if not running, because we've done all the walking and running for them. So for me, I've actually had to learn to be less biased for action, right? Hold myself back, convince myself that doing too much is actually not good for others. And even having an honest conversation with my family to say like, hey, this round can somebody else do the organizing? Or actually, I'm really busy this round. I'm feeling a little tired and burnout. Can somebody else step up instead? So just daring, honestly, daring is the word, like daring to be vulnerable and daring to show that I'm human too, right? So
yeah.
just
I,
wanted to add.
I, I, and I think that can be quite a difficult thing. Speaking just as, I mean, again, like I grew up in the UK, but I've spent 10 years now living in both in Hong Kong and Singapore, and I know culturally that can be quite difficult with family environments to be able to, admit that there's a period of time where you are feeling overwhelmed or you're, you know, what might be perceived as something that's a weakness in that sense, or losing face or something in that regard. So I think that's always a tough battle, and I guess it's always good to find ways of how to overcome that. I think really, just
And
thinking about from a personal point of view.
I
So
think also
I guess like, yeah,
expectations and roles, right? Sorry to cut you in, Jay. I was just thinking, I think face is one thing, but I think more than that is being comfortable to show that I have also changed and evolved. Because sometimes with family, they think that you should be the same as they have known you for the last 30, 40 years.
yeah,
And sometimes we are afraid. In fact, sometimes I joke that maybe our colleagues, our bosses, our friends in later life know us better than our own family members because we are kind of stuck in their minds in a certain way. And sometimes
yeah.
we allow ourselves to be stuck, right? And we keep fulfilling what they expect of us. And it's just about shedding that skin in that season and say, this is who I am now. And that is also me. And I hope that that's okay with you as well. I mean, it's not okay. We'll find a new equilibrium, right? And just,
Yeah, I think that dynamic with parent children as well, because your parents, in a way, they're always like, oh, you're always my baby in that way, right? Like even though you're a grown adult at that point, maybe you have your own family, they still kind of look at you in that way. But I think if you can have that healthy relationship where they appreciate that okay, you also have your own responsibilities and your own interests, and of course you'll have evolved as a person, then and they have to, try and be as accepting of that as possible, really. So yeah, that's another challenge, I think. But then I guess you can't control all of that as well, right? Like you can only really control
that sphere of influence.
the bits from your side. Yeah,
I think we have a great question from Evelina in the chat, in the
sure.
Q&A rather.
Yeah, let's jump into it. So question from Evelina was, how do you efficiently and effortlessly, and then she prefaces, if there's something as such, cope with energy management? And so from her point of view, she says, I feel I have to overachieve sometimes, and I'm still dealing with this. I'm trying to manage my time, but my energy is a bit more difficult to tone up and down.
Yes. Thank you for this really important question, Evelina. I think people talk about time management. I agree with you. I think it's more about energy management, right? Because we all know, even though we have technically 8 hours in a day or a bit more to do productive work, our energy levels and intensity is really not the same. So I like to do something called an energy audit. And I encourage all of us to do that. And there are 4 dimensions to this energy audit. There's body, emotions, mind, and spiritual. Now, spiritual doesn't have to be religious. It can just be kind of like your soul, how you're feeling, right? In terms of your spiritual soul kind of energy. And I think body first is really just feeling physically. What are the first signs that something is draining for you or that you're getting approaching burnout? So just firstly, just awareness, right? The red lights flashing or even yellow lights flashing. So for me, for example, it might be that if I am getting more headaches, migraines, if I sometimes grit my teeth, right? If I feel like I'm clenching my fist or I'm getting like nervous, jittery fingers, not sure if you feel that. These are all signs for me in my body, right? That, okay, something is not right. And also just getting one level down granularly to say, okay, are there certain people, activities, environments, like if you give them, let's say you rate yourself every day, you keep almost like an energy journal. If you give them from a +3 for positive, topping up your tank, 0 for neutral, up to -3 for negative drains, it's very great. Like I think it's really, really useful for us to like get objectively rating. Does this interaction with this person, this activity that I'm doing, this environment in particular, this ambience, does it top up my tank, drain it, or is it kind of mostly neutral? And we do it across body, across emotions, how it impacts our emotions, our mind, right? Our thoughts, our beliefs, our convictions, as well as down to how's my soul feeling, really getting in touch with your gut and your intuition. And I think the energy audits. But really to answer Evelina's question, I think there are different people that will give different answers. I'm very, very honest. I think I'm someone that for the longest time I struggled with boom and bust cycles. I'm someone that when I sprint, I really sprint. It's like interval running. And then when I'm buzzed, I sometimes need to just be flat on my face for a day or 2 or even 3 days. And I used to think like, what's wrong with me? I wish I were more consistent and steady and predictable. But then I realized, no, my superpower is being passionate, exuberant, right? That's who I am. And it's not something you can switch on and off. It comes together as a double-edged sword. Of course, we work on polishing the sharper ends, but I realized that, okay, if my optimal, if my natural state is boom and bust, what can I do to honor that boom and bust, but yet maybe make the boom and the bust less sharp and make the cycles less frequent? So rather than trying to be somebody else, like a Jamie or Yasas or Evelina in this case, or anyone else in this room, I'm being myself, but I'm paying attention to my own cadence, my own cues, and minimizing, if you were to plot it on a curve, minimizing this and making it gentler and the recovery faster. So I don't know if that encourages you, but again, I'm a huge believer of understanding yourself first and then getting attuned, then finding an approach that works for you. So for me, I've learned to not beat myself up for boom and bust, but to actually work together like a dance with my boom and bust, but make it less boom, less bust.
Yeah,
Thank
that
you.
sounds good.
Yeah.
Romy, thank you very much. Just one question, I guess, related to that. Do you also think energy levels are also a function of age, like the energy we had in our 20s versus in 30s versus 40s, and then in 50s? Would that kind of diminish over time, or are we able to maintain the same level of energy or even increase the level of energy as we kind of grow older?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say the answer is it depends on a few things. Firstly, I think all of us have an inherent temperament and energy, our baseline levels. So for example, when I tell people you should have met Ruo-Mei in when she was 18 or 21, I was even way more over the top then. People go, oh my gosh, is that even possible? Right? So I would say, firstly, if you compare me with most people my age, 39, turning 40 next year, I'm probably super extroverted, like an energizer bunny, right? So every 40-year-old is not the same. So personality and temperament makes a difference. But relative to ourselves, I think that wanes and changes relative to the roles that we play. For example, like Jamie said, having a young 5-year-old child, 4-year-old in my case, that obviously taps into our tank as well. Or if you have to care for an aged parent that is ailing, then obviously that also taps into your tank, right? And maybe sometimes people go through trauma, that also changes their energy level and who they are. So I think everything, age, incidents, life stages, all of that, right? Yeah, I think it all plays a role. But I think it's, again, back to firstly, do we really need that much energy for what we are doing? What's an optimal energy level for ourselves? And how do we manage that resource and space it out the way that we are glad to have it? So I think it really I keep wanting to cycle it back to it. It's not about measuring up to somebody else's baseline or optimum. What works for us in this season? And this season for you might be different from you in the last season. So, in an earlier stage of my life, I kept wanting to go back to who I was before. But I realized no, I gradually I learned to love who I am in this season and embrace that change that comes with it, rather than keep wanting to go back to that past, right? Because that's neither possible nor healthy.
Yeah, and your experiences that you've gained since then will help shape what you continue to do after
That's
that as
right.
well. So
Yeah, I know we have some other great questions as well, and
I know, yeah, I can see
for
they're
the
firing in.
fun
Yeah.
from
So
chat.
okay, so let's tap into the next question. I think I mean, generally the next couple sort of relate to boundaries, so I suppose that we might be able to group them together. But the first question says, "Hi, Ruo-Mei. I sometimes struggle to bring up boundaries without feeling like I'm being difficult or too much. I would love to hear your suggestions on this. If you maybe want to touch
Yes,
on that one."
this is so real. I think, firstly, this is a real struggle I've had for many, many years, if not decades as well. And I think first you have to win the inner conversation with yourself, because we're not going to be able to verbalize anything if we can't persuade ourselves that we are worthy of speaking about boundaries. So, for example, I always ask myself, why is it easy for me to advocate for somebody else's space and time and boundaries for them? It's because I honor that person and I think they are worthwhile. So then, I guess if we struggle to articulate our own boundaries, maybe the deeper question is, how do we see ourselves? I think that's one deep question I always ask myself. Do I see myself as worthy of that same kindness and care and respect that I give to others? And if I feel that I'm less than worthy, why? Where is that coming from? So I like to dig deeper into the root issues over there. But I think another thing as well is, I'm not sure if there's a gender, I'm not sure who asked this question because it's anonymous, but I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that sometimes certain personality types like Enneagram 8s or certain like males in general, to generalize, tend to struggle a little less. Whether it's negotiating for salaries, right, asserting their rights or boundaries, sometimes they find it a little easier to say that. Whereas I know women, many female friends like me, we struggle to say we need time, we need rest, or as a mom to say, look, actually, I need just a day off, not even a weekend, like a few hours off from being a mom, right? From being a daughter, for example. So I think the answer, I'm not sure if there is a real answer. I think firstly is to change our self-perception that, hey, I am not too anything, too much to anything, right? I may be too much for some people, but in some circumstances, that's actually what people appreciate about me. And it's about finding my own tribe. Second, I have gone through many stages where I disregarded my own boundaries and I pushed through and I overserved at my own expense. And what happens is that I tend to resent that person and that situation. And that leaks out. My tone maybe becomes passive aggressive, it becomes more curt, right? Or my face, I start getting grumpy and it's not healthy, right? So I think it's about saying, look, boundaries, they are there to protect. And if I don't honor that boundary in the short term, in the long term, it will come back anyway. It's going to leak out in some ways. And I think ultimately it just comes back to self-worth and self-respect. And that's a deeper conversation that takes time to take apart, I think. I'm sorry if
Yeah.
that was a philosophical answer, but that's genuinely my own.
No, not at all. Yeah, I do think you touched on some really important points there in that sense, because I think the way it does get tackled um, with the sort of a gender divide, I think does, like, you see it in a lot of instances as well, just even in like applying for jobs and things like that, like
But maybe in
maybe
case, just to add on, maybe in case, so that was the philosophical meta answer, but in case the person was asking for some practical scripts, like how to articulate boundaries, I think first it looks like validating and thanking the person for the opportunity, right? So for example, a person is wanting you to slot in something last minute on a Sunday. And let's say my boundary is Sunday is my protected family time. I'm going to honor that. I might say, hey, thank you so much of thinking of me for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. So first is like thanking, appreciating, validating. Second, to say, however, this, I do have a personal policy that on or personal conviction or belief that I like to keep to, which is that Sunday is protected time for my family. And I like to keep to that, right? Because I've already made plans for that weekend, right? I would love to partner with you for something else in the future, but for this particular initiative, I'll be glad to refer you to somebody else if that's up your alley as well. So basically, first is you validate and thank. Second, if you feel like you want to, just explain very briefly, but equally don't feel obliged. Just say, I can't make it, right? And then the third is maybe offer an alternative if you are able to and feel like you want to. So that's my go-to. I generally like to explain, not because I feel like I need to, but because if I were to reverse roles, I like to know. I think it's good to know, then there's no misunderstanding down the line. Yeah, but again,
Yeah.
don't feel obliged. So I hope that helps
That-
on the practical side of articulating boundaries.
it reminds me just quickly of like this psychological phenomenon that if you just give a reason for something, then quite often people will, the most part accept it. I mean, they might not agree with it, but they will accept that as is. And I think the scenario I remember seeing was if people were queuing up for the photocopying machine and then somebody just stepped in the front of the queue and said,
Yes.
I'm in a rush or something like that. Like that, whether that's justified to actually do that or not, the fact that you give a reason for it, people most of the time are like, okay, fine, and they'll do it. So I think it's fair enough to give some context and protect your space in that sense as well, right? That this is something that's important to you.
That's right. And I honestly want to keep saying that every time you assert a boundary, even if the person reacts badly, it's building self-trust. It's signaling each time you dare to speak about your boundary that I am worth it. I am worth it I'm valuable enough to communicate my boundary. Just like I would advocate for somebody else's boundaries with as much gusto as well. So it's that building that self-trust as well.
I've launched a little poll here just because obviously this topic has come up with a couple of questions, so people can answer anonymously. You don't have to put your name to it. It just give an answer of like whether this is something that impacts you, and then we can see.
Do you think we should answer the next question with, there's another question further down on boundaries as well, reestablishing boundaries with people who are used to you being constantly available?
Yeah. So the question says, how do you reestablish boundaries with people who are used to you being constantly available? Pretty often you get labeled as a changed person when you try to protect your well-being instead of being a constant giver.
Yeah. I think it's really hard, especially if these people are people you love or used to love, especially family members. I think, okay, so there's this quote, right, that people will treat you the way you have allowed yourself to be treated. So meaning, for example, do you have friends, for example, when you text them, they instantly reply? And then you have friends who, they take 3 days, if not a week to reply. And over time, you kind of get used to it. You expect them to not reply you quickly. Right? So if you're like me and you're the instant reply kind, and if you don't reply, people are like, what's going on? Why is she ghosting me? Then I think we need to slowly wean them off this over dependency. And sometimes it goes with communicating boundaries. So for example, I might say, I'm so sorry right now with a young kid and my schedule being a little packed. Please do expect my replies to be a little longer than usual. I will get to it. In fact, what I've done with some of my friends is say, hey, if I don't reply to you after some time, it's because I actually want to be in the right headspace to reply to you. It's not one of those things where I can say yes, no, real quick. I want to give this actual thought. So again, back to my earlier point, I try to communicate my thought behind the delay. And if they take it, most of the time they do take it because I think it's reasonable. But if they don't, then back to my favorite word, which is seasons. There may be some people are just meant to journey with you through certain seasons and not journey with you for the season that you are in. Or, if your life is a whole train ride or journey, some people join you for just 10 stations and they get off, and other people continue journeying with you or new ones come on board. So I think it's just being okay to also enjoy the season you're in, but let the people go who are meant to go. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I'm just going to end the poll there. And I think if I
share
share the
results,
results, everyone should see it. It should just pop on the screen.
Just in case anyone is curiously.
I think it's a bit of echo.
Yes.
Just let me know if you want to talk here, and I'll mute myself. So you'll see in the poll here that 100% of those who answered are having boundary issues, either a lot or a little. There's nobody who is saying never in that sense. So yeah, this is certainly something which is across the board, at least in the group that we have here as well. So yeah, it is an important topic. So, and there are a couple more questions on that topic as well. I just have a little quick look, and then yes, I think he wants to add a little point, so I'm just going to mute as well.
Yes, sis?
Yeah, I had a question on kind of perception management. If you take a person like you, I think you are a coach, you are a speaker, so then there's like a public image that you maintain, and some of professionals, founders, freelancers also do have a public kind of image to maintain as well. And when you kind of manage boundaries and kind of be upfront with people on your kind of boundaries and set expectations, how would you kind of think about perception management? Is it important to manage that perception or the public image, or how would you go about it, like when you kind of set those expectations with people as well as kind of create boundaries clearly? Would that also kind of impact negatively as to what you're building in the public domain?
That's right. I think that's a great question. And I think firstly, if there's perception management, you're managing a perception, the bigger question is, how do you then want people to perceive you? And I think it goes back to what is that personal brand that you're trying to create? What's your personal brand and identity when you're not in the room? How do you want people to describe your impact and your presence and what you stand for? So I think for me, I always think of myself, I want to be authentic. I want to be transparent and two-way with my partners. I want to work with them long term, and I want to give value to make sure that I honor their time. So I think first is really, I think for everyone in the room, I'm sure you all have various answers, like what is your personal brand identity first? Kind of like how the best companies would think about what's my brand, and then you curate everything, right? Religiously based on that. Then second, then you manage the perception based on that. So for example, when I assert boundaries, so I just did that in fact 2 days ago because I got signed on by an accelerator in the Middle East, which is the first time I'm working with accelerator in the region. I was referred there. And I had to articulate a few boundaries. Firstly, because some accelerators, they have fixed rates for mentors across the board, regardless of what service you render or your experience levels. To be honest, that the rate was quite a bit lower than what I'm used to. So, and there are certain KPIs. For example, you have to meet for 3 hours with a particular startup, right, in order to meet that benchmark. So I said, okay, I will only agree to these things in your agreement as discussed verbally already and agreed upon. And also, I just wanted to give you an early heads up that in the spirit of transparency, the rates are quite a bit lower than what I would usually quote my partners, but I would still love to help you in one way or another. So that's why I'm partnering with you with this, right? So telling the truth, but also saying I'm actually willing to partner with you in this. But that being said, I seek your understanding that during busy seasons, I will have to honor my long-standing customers and prioritize those that are pre-booked, meaning that if startups come last minute to book things, I may have to decline and I might not be able to squeeze in things in that short amount of time. So what I've done is I've said up front, right? So there's no misunderstanding later on or unhappiness, right? So I show that I've compromised somewhat, so I've accommodated, met them in the middle, but I'm also showing them where that line is. And in a way, that is my brand because I am candid. I don't like it when people misunderstand. And similarly, I don't like to misinterpret people's intentions. So that is my brand. And if that is how they perceive me, it's accurate. Ruo-Mei is candid, authentic. She speaks her truth. Great. That is exactly the perception. If you don't like it, then it's okay. We will agree to disagree. And maybe in this season, we're just not meant to partner together.
Yeah, and what's really useful in that point of view, and that applies to say like freelancers, anybody who's working
And there was a
building their own business is also then by doing that early, you can the thing that you get taught when you do sales is to actually try and disqualify opportunities early, right? You don't want to think, okay, every opportunity is going to lead to a positive outcome. You need to see, okay, what one is realistic, what is a good fit with what we're doing. And I think that's a good way to do it with those boundaries you just mentioned, because then you'll very quickly realize, is this the fit for me? And save your time as well. It's very precious.
it's an opportunity cost, and not just time, but energy, like we were chatting about earlier. So sometimes, again, if you feel like if you haven't asserted your boundaries, if you say yes when you actually, it's more of a maybe or actually no, then if it's a low rate, if it's a last minute request, basically your boundaries are being trampled upon, you're going to go in unhappy. And again, that is going to show up somewhere. And then that's actually going to affect the perception that Yasas was asking about. That's going to be negative, and that is really not helpful for everybody in the long term. Yeah.
So we've got more questions, and we'll jump
Yes,
to them.
please.
And I guess we started to touch on this next question just now. So the question says, in small companies and in freelancing, is it harder to maintain boundaries? So I guess, what advice and tips you could share, given that that's something you've also experienced yourself working.
Besides being candid, I think many of my coaches, clients, partners, friends would also know that I'm very real and realistic sometimes. So what this means is if you're just starting out, if you're just starting to build your brand awareness, like me in the early days, there are some times that, again, if you're okay with that, you might have to start small, you might have to bend over backwards, show that you're responsive, show that you are readily available. I think that's just part of earning your stripes in the early days, right? So we kind of have to pay that tuition fees upfront. But as you have built your track record and credibility, of course, continue to stay responsive throughout. But you might then say, oh, actually, during, for example, I would say during my Q3 and Q4, which is my absolute peak season, I need at least 3 weeks, if not certain periods up to 1.5 months of lead time in order to secure you that preferred slot. Of course, if it's really urgent, I'll do my best, but then no promises. Right. So I think, again, just being preemptive, being very intentional, articulating that early, but of course, building on that foundation of trust that you have established in the early days of earning your stripes.
Even more questions coming in, which is great. Yeah, keep them
Yes,
coming. Or
more
if
questions.
anybody wants to also ask those questions verbally, they can as well. Just raise your hand and we can unmute you. But the next question says, what do you think of energy management in the context of male versus female? I guess it's sort of leading on from what you'd mentioned a little bit earlier on as well.
Yes. I think, okay, so I hope this is not TMI, like too much information, but I think females, of course, males, you have your own hormonal cycles as well. But for females, we have a very real monthly thing where our hormones fluctuate. Never mind pregnancy and all that, just our regular, like periods and menstruation. And that does absolutely impact energy management. Women have also been proven generally, again, to take on a lot of mental load, invisible mental load at home. So that also impacts energy management, right? So I think firstly, I do think it's different. We are differently strong in different areas. So first, just realizing that a female is not a different version of a male is not a different version of a female, just honoring who we are built to be. And I think, again, paying attention to what are my cues that my energy levels, whether it's physical, body, emotional, mental, spiritual, are changing and dipping in a way that I don't like. And then another thing, this is not directly energy management in terms of physical energy, but sometimes women are very aware of being too assertive. Sometimes we are accused of being aggressive. For just as equally assertive as men, we might be seen as aggressive. And I think that, again, is a conversation we want to have with ourselves. Like, what is actually, assertiveness is defined as speaking. I define it simply as being clear is being kind. I am being clear, but I'm also being kind in the way I'm articulating it. Right?
Yeah.
That's it. Just being assertive is not being aggressive. Aggressiveness is when you don't honor and you don't see the emotions and the impact on others. We don't want to be that. We don't want to be obnoxious or aggressive, but neither do we want to be passive and just fall over like or anything. So assertiveness is exactly the boundaries you've been saying. Like, I will say what I need. I will also acknowledge that you have your needs. I will do what I can to meet you in the middle, but I also will not infringe upon my boundaries because they are there. They're there to protect us for the long term. They're actually also there as a qualifier, meaning to qualify and assess, are we a right fit for each other in the long term? So I think the simplest way to think about it is a dating analogy. So if we pretend to be who you are, like let's say I love running and I'm a very like passionate, very direct person. And I pretend to be this like docile, subservient girl, very girly, feminine. I mean, sure, I can maybe con you for the first 6 months, 9 months. And after I'm like, no, I'm not gonna cook and clean for you. That's just not who I am. I have other strengths, right? After a while, if you basically pretend to be who you're not and you don't show who you really are, in the long term, it's gonna flop anyway. It's gonna create unhappiness all around. So I
Yeah.
actually see boundaries, being clear and being kind and being intentional early on, like we said earlier, is actually a way of assessing, are we a good fit for each other? Let's cut the losses, let's not waste time, and let's really assess a litmus test that's real, that's unvarnished. So again, my own personal opinion.
No, it's really good. And then actually, just the bit that you mentioned reminded me. During International Women's Day earlier this year, we did an in-person event in Singapore with one of our partners, a lady called Alika Tasker, who does a lot of like energy optimization. And she also mentioned like the topic was the feminine flow masterclass. So it was saying about this the seasons within the month as well of when you can be at your optimum level to perhaps maybe go out and be sociable or close deals, and then other times where you need to rest and to reflect on your business operations or whatever it might be in that sense. So I found that really fascinating as well, because I think even though it wasn't exactly positioned towards me, it helped me understand a little bit more about, okay, how I need to be aware of these things as well. And I think we could all learn from that in terms of just like business and personal environments too.
I definitely want to get through as many questions that are being asked, and I want to honor also whatever is shared in the chat. So thank you all for your comments. I'm reading it.
Yeah, some
I
really good
can't
ones.
heart what you say in the chat, but know that I'm hearting it in my heart. Right. And hello, Muing dear. My very dear friend is here as well as Makoto-san.
All right. Okay, so let's fire through them. So high achievers are often the reliable ones. How can that be both a strength and a trap?
I almost feel like that's a self-evident one. I think it's absolutely a double-edged sword, right? Where in Chinese, we actually have this proverb, 能者多劳. The capable ones are basically given more work. So I think we've all been there. If you work, you're more productive. You just add up, in 5 days, you do 2x or 2.5x the amount of work everybody else does. So I think obviously that's a strength, because then you're valued, you might be promoted, you might get a lot of gigs as self-employed people. But it's also a trap, because we're so productive, it's almost like nowadays we have AI, we have tools. The million-dollar question for all of us is, what are we doing with that white space that AI is supposedly freeing up for ourselves? Are we filling it with more things to do, whether professional or personal, or are we actually taking time to rest and enjoy that buffer, as I think somebody else answered, as Cynthia was asking? So absolutely, I
Yeah,
think edged
a nice segue into that one. So from Cynthia, it says, how much buffer do you allow yourself when taking on work so there's balance between growth / slack? And from her point of view, she said she finds it's a challenge not to take on too much, but at the same time still wanting to lock in work in case things change.
Cynthia, I just want to say that I hear you, I feel you, and it's very, very real, especially when, again, I like to use proverbs, and in Chinese, you always say, 未雨绸缪, you store up for a rainy day. And in some cases, it's like Singapore Reserve, we store up a lot and we think that rainy day is going to come. While it's good to be prudent, at the same time, what I've found, Cynthia, practically is that I work in what I call white space. So if we use an old farming analogy, you know how they would not pick clean the entire field. They would actually leave some parameters where people can glean the fruits. So I kind of like to see that in my schedule where I have some white space. So for example, I'll deliberately leave Monday mornings free because I often have to train on Saturdays. So I basically don't have the full weekend, never mind that family kind of eats and creeps into that happily. So I try not to schedule things for Monday mornings unless I have trainings. If I have trainings 3 or 4 days a week, I try to counter suggest for trainings to be shifted when new ones come in. But that being said, Cynthia, I don't know if you feel that as well. I always think I've put in white space, and then when new meetings come in, everything is urgent, right? Eisenhower matrix, everything is urgent, but they're not really. And then I say yes, and my white space gets eaten up. So a little test I use for myself or question is, if this thing, for example, invitation to speak on something or something, a request, if this thing comes in 2 days, like it's happening this week, would I still say yes? And the reason for that is that usually a request comes in a month in advance. We look at our calendars and we say, it's okay, it's empty, I'll say yes. But actually a month later, your calendar is likely to be as busy as it is this very week, right? Mostly, of course, our cadence changes weekly, quarterly, but we always anticipate that we'll be freer than we actually are when we get to that point in time. So I think first try to
That's a
build in
good
more
tip.
white space that you think you need. Ask yourself, this is what happening today, tomorrow, later this week, 2 days from now. Would I still say yes? Is this like a hell yes? Or is this more like a nah, not really. I'll be too tired. I'll be too busy to say yes. Right. And I think Cynthia on the point about, again, it's different stages. Sometimes when you're still building your business, it is understandable that we say yes to almost everything, but eventually we get selective with our yeses because then we also choose to specialize. So for example, while I am someone that likes to say yes as much as I can still, there are certain requests that come in, I will say, no, actually, I can think of a better person to do this for you. And then I will I'll redirect it to somebody else and also share that business pipeline with them.
Love it. Yeah, some really good ones. So we have Mui. Says, hi, my dear friend. Love what you shared about having self-understanding and acceptance of who we are instead of compare ourselves to others. Yeah, absolutely. The question is, how do you protect your value of authenticity, sorry, with the tongue twister, with clients and environments that may not align with yours?
How do you protect that value? I think first is, I think it's actually quite tied, uncannily with the previous question. I think first is daring to walk away from what doesn't feel right, rather than being held hostage by that fear of scarcity. Because I think when we fear that, oh, that's not enough, you have to grab onto everything, even if it doesn't feel right, then, I mean, first, if there's scarcity mindset, we're not going to be able to say no to begin with, because we feel like we have to say yes all the time. Second, gut sense. So for example, if you are being extremely responsive to a customer, you're giving a lot in the early stages and they're just not responsive, or they only take what they want from you, you don't get that same sense of long-term value partnership, values alignment, then it might be well serving you to listen to your gut and cut the losses short early. It's a bit like dating, right? You know, sometimes we sense red flags and then we push through anyway. So I think it's hard to define it. It's a bit of a gut check. But that being said, of course, everyone's situation is unique. So we have to really first be okay saying no. Second, ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Does this remind me of a previous situation where it didn't feel right and it didn't turn out right as well? And then third, I like to ask myself also, if I did say no, what do I fear the most? What's the worst that could happen if I said no? Yeah, so I like to reverse ask myself those questions, and I hope that helps a bit, Mui.
Awesome. There's a couple more coming in as well. Just as a note, I'm muting between because there's a little bit of construction noise next door. I don't want that to impact your flow. I'm jumping to one because I think this question, we really want to get this one as well. So one of the attendees said, I've always loved painting, once dreamed of being an artist, but I chose not to turn it into a career because I was afraid I would lose that kind of joy. So the question is, do you think every passion needs to be monetized, or is there value in keeping some things maybe as a hobby just for yourself without feeling like you're wasting that talent?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I can almost guess who asked that as well. I think no, actually, every passion, in fact, the word passion itself, by definition, is just something that you love. If you think about the ikigai circles, right? There is what you're good at, which is your strengths, what you actually enjoy, that's the what you love, what the world needs, and what the world will pay you for. And the fact that there are many situations and permutations where they don't overlap. So obviously ikigai is when all four overlap, tells you that, of course, yes, passion oftentimes doesn't have to always be monetized. In fact, I know of many dear friends, they love music, they love art, they love photography, and he would spend a lot of money and time on it, traveling to take photos, taking wedding photography for free. And he told me once, he said, I choose not to monetize it because I don't want it to feel like work. I enjoy this passion. I want to keep it as a hobby. I will work so I can fund my other hobbies on the side and derive maximum joy and pleasure from it. So I don't think
like you said about body, mind, spirit, everything like that as well. There's things that can nourish other aspects. You don't have doesn't have to always be a bank thing.
Yeah, and the last part about without feeling about wasting our talent, I actually think that talent is not wasted so long as we are either serving somebody with that talent, whether through a hobby or through something that is a vocation, or even giving ourselves pleasure through the expression of that talent. So I really don't think it's wasted, whether you choose to monetize it or not. So I highly encourage, if that's you, many ones of us feel that same way, no. And sometimes it might be that monetization could come later, but don't rush it. In fact, honestly, because I work with entrepreneurs all the time and the stats bear it out, the entrepreneurs that tend to succeed are not the young ones that are vaunted in the press. They are actually the ones that start that side hustle while they still have a full-time job somewhere. They iterate, they tinker because they have that time and that runway to not rush into things. So I think monetization should be something that maybe comes later, but don't feel like I have to otherwise. Right. So I highly encourage all of you, keep up that passion, and maybe that path will lead you somewhere that is pleasantly unexpected for you.
Love that as well. Yeah. So we have another question here, and then I think then we'll have a couple of minutes to unmute some people. I'm going to pick on you in a second. So the last question is, any personal productivity tips? I think you already just shared one around having that space for white noise in your calendar so that you can think and be creative and things like that as well. But any others that you can think of that jump out in that sense of how we can, I suppose, be as productive as possible, especially for those on the call that are maybe building their own businesses or working and supporting families and so on?
Yes, I have a few ones. Of course, ChatGPT, Google has so many, right? Whether it's James Clear 321, time boxing. Again, ask yourself what works for you, because believe me, I've tried it. So for example, I am maybe the rebellious sort. So time boxing, they say give it a time and space on your calendar. So like 12 to 2, I'm going to do this particular proposal. It's funny, whenever I put it, it never gets done that day and that time slot. It's almost like the universe is like, nah. So what I do is I kind of plan for it. I'll color code it. Actually, first I color code it so I know how much is going to admin, how much is going to actual training or meetings. And I color code it, but I have the expectation that it will get done maybe somewhere that day, but it doesn't have to be in that time slot that it's in. Or I even give it buffer, like it needs to be done by Wednesday. I kind of plot for it to be on Monday. Right? So I kind of know that it's going to get done, but I'm not strictly adhering to that particular segment. Second, I don't know if you're like me, but paperwork is one of like the banes of my life. So I trick myself. So I think this is in line with some other personal productivity gurus, where the hardest thing is to get started. So what I do is sometimes when I'm so tired and I still have to get on my laptop and do stuff, I will actually do it in my bed. I'll put on the Netflix, but I actually not watch. I'm just tricking my body, be like, okay, I'm in bed, right? I'm in my pajamas, I'm working. And actually, before I know it, 3 hours later, I'm still working. But just because Netflix is on, which I'm not watching, but it's on, the screen is actually on, I feel like I'm relaxing. It's not hard work, your body, your mind is sometimes like a child. You kind of have to play fun games with it. So that's how, like, what works for me. Third, I think, again, understand what works for you. So for me, I think better, ironically, when I speak, because then I'm not, how autocorrect is really annoying. I think it interrupts my flow when I type things. And so I actually prefer to speak. So what that means is that in the past, sometimes for very long replies to friends or partners, clients, I tend to take a while to type it up, or I might wait a while to get back to them because I need that head space to type that long answer out. Nowadays, I just do voice messages, and I will just say, I'm so sorry if I'm playing this because I'm on the go. And I actually feel that it helps me get through my stuff faster, clear my mental inbox, and still get the job done. So that's part of my own productivity hack as well, doing what works for you, obviously with the understanding from the other side that that's okay with them as well. So here are just like real productivity tips. And I think if you keep hearing me nag the same refrain, it's all about finding out what works for you. And that starts with understanding your own patterns, your cues, your cadence as well. And of course, aligning it with what you want for yourself this season and that personal brand, the authentic values that you want to portray for yourself throughout.
I love a voice note as well, so I'm with you on that one for sure. Yeah, I think some of my friends get annoyed though. It's like they're like mini podcasts sometimes. But yeah, like typing it out takes a long time. You're right, and thinking about how you want to write it.
Yes. But that being said, I have friends equally who say that they think better and more clearly, they're more coherent when they write. And I say, great, you do you. So that works for you, please do that. Right? But I think it's not about being bound artificially to what is the norm, because sometimes people's norm is they accept your norm for what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember I worked with someone in London who could, like, the way they wrote was so eloquent and so easy to understand. And then when I catch up with them in person, I'm like, are you writing this? And this was definitely pre-AI. So there was no shenanigans there. It was them writing it in that sense. But yeah, you're right. Everyone's a bit different. And you said, find what works for you. Right. I'm going to
There's
pick
one
somebody.
final question, I think.
Yeah,
Self-care.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, do you want to tackle that one? Or should we get somebody to talk?
Yeah, but either way, your call, Jamie is us.
Yeah, sure. I was thinking because so one of our members who's on the call, she's recently actually started her own venture, and she was previously working for one of the biggest corporate companies in the world at Visa. So I thought it'd be nice to kind of get her point of view as well. So Danielle, I'm picking on you to share your point of view as well, or if you've got any questions you'd like to ask Ruo-Mei as well. So here we go. Okay, so over to you.
Hey everyone, I hope you can hear me all right.
Yep.
Excellent, great. Well, thanks for this. This was really inspiring, and I liked the energy. It was really lovely listening to you. Yeah, so I had a sense you would pick on me. I was just about to drop out, so I missed the opportunity. No, no real questions actually, but I was reflecting on the whole thing myself because I only just started out, right? So it's a bit abstract to imagine myself and being in those multiple roles like a genuine entrepreneur. But I think for me, even just a decision to leave corporate, um, it was also a boundary that I drew for myself, right? To say that I feel that this is not really as rewarding, it's not as in line with the values and the purpose that I envision my life to have, right? So that was a very drastic step that I had to make, a line that I had to draw for myself. And the exciting thing is now, starting from scratch so I can define it for myself as a young entrepreneur, not an age, but in the business age. I see myself being confronted with a lot of ideas. People are like, oh, why don't you do this? Why don't you think about this? Why? I'm kind of stuck with that. Oh, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I should listen to them. Maybe what they're saying is better than what I'm thinking of. So you're like torn in all of these directions. And I think for me, it's really, bringing back to, okay, is this really in line with where I'm headed? Is this going to be in support of that? And also, are these people really knowledgeable about what they are talking about? Are they really going to be the people who are going to be paying my bills, or are they just, you know, perhaps also projecting their fears and their ideas onto me? So that is something where I need to keep centering myself continuously as well.
100%. I couldn't agree more, Danelle. And to give, I think it goes back to what do you want? What do you craft for your life? So, for example, a very real example, Danelle, you might, again, you get a lot of advice from different senses because I work with startups so much. I keep getting asked, like, oh, so how are you going to scale up? Why don't you scale up, hire more people? And I said, my mission in coming up, by the way, in case you're wondering, SUTW stands for Smiling Up the World Impact Consulting. And there's a story behind it. And I listed that in my name to remind myself of the mission. I'm here to change the world, but a person at a time, a smile each time. And to me, I came out of corporate, all these big names to really impact people on the front line. But hiring people, as Danelle, you probably are aware of, involves kind of retreating a little bit and then managing the people internally, which is great, but that's not, I always joke, I said, if I wanted to do that, then I'll just stay in corporate because the hustle is intensely different, right? But, why would I come out? I came out for a real reason. And I think I always tell people I'm doing this as an impact multiplier. If I touch you, you touch 10, you touch you, then they then go on to touch another 10. I'm happy. I don't have to own that. But I think it takes really understanding what matters to me. What is my why, right? WHY. What's my why that drives me? What is the impact that I want to create? And then being almost laser focused. Now we're still open-minded, but then we are staying mission focused. And like you said, Jenna, I love what you said about asking when people say things in your life, are they going to be responsible for what they said? Where is it coming from? Like, where is it really coming from? And also, do they have your best intentions at heart? So are they credible? Do they have your best intentions at heart as well? And of course, does it ultimately align with your own vision for what you're trying to create and craft for yourself? I don't know if that resonates with you and the rest in this call.
That would be really sad, but as a HR professional, I would recommend not to touch too many people.
Yeah, for sure. Well, maybe in their spirit, right? In their soul, that would be good. Yeah. Love that. Thanks, Daniel, and thanks Roy as well. I know we're just at the hour as well. I wanted maybe one more person, just because I think it was quite interesting. Like, I think it's always nice to have those who are, haven't been on here as much. So Janet, I was just going to see if you wanted to add a little point of view as well, before we wrap up. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to unmute you.
Hi.
Hi, Janet.
And hi, Ruo-Mei. I just got a feeling I might be cold, but I don't know why. I think I'm the most
the lottery, right?
I must be the most odd one out in this whole webinar, because unlike any one of you, I am in a different season of my life.
Okay.
And you probably wouldn't know. I am okay. I don't like to use the word in my retirement years, but I have retired for more than 14 years now.
Okay.
Yes, but it's a different season. But just listening, I just came in 10 minutes. I just registered 10 minutes before the Zoom started.
Yeah.
And I said, I must listen to Ruo-Mei. Okay, by the way, Ruo-Mei and I are related.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, related in a good sense, yes. Anyways, I just want to add that being in this season, I've got many questions that after listening to, the discussion and all the inputs, I just asked myself, I have to realign myself in some ways, where I ask, do I have time schedules? Do I have commitments? Do I have to be accountable to anybody? What about my relationships management? Yeah, and all these require some form of energy, definitely. Yeah, and to manage my own energy with regards to some of these areas, I also have to ask myself, what really excites me? I think at the end of it all, when we talk about energy, I really have to ask myself, whatever I'm doing, whether in relationships or commitments that I have, put on paper, schedules that I have already, put in place, and the people that I constantly are meeting on a weekly basis, and so on. What really excites me, and at which point? And then I think I'm so glad, Ruo-Mei, you brought up, energy, looking at from the point of body, mind, and spirit. I think they all add up. And I want to say that, our life seasons change. My life season is different from yours, but certainly this season of my life, I don't want to see it as, these are my twilight years, it's like going downhill, it's like, my body is not functioning as what I would like it to. I want to have more energy, but then I find myself, well, there's certain things I can do to manage it. And to a good extent, I must say, yes, there are things that I can do to manage my own energy levels, whether it's my body, my mind, and my spirit. But I would just want to say that a lot of it has to do with the mind. And I think I want to emphasize that my mind affects my body. What I think, the thoughts that I put into my head or allow to come in to fester or to grow or whatever, will have an impact on my body, whether it is positive or negative. So all in all, I just want to say that this is a good season, regardless. I think every one of you are in the right season, and there's no wrong season. And every season, I think we need to find our own voice. We need to find our own space where we can find ourselves and to grow in the way we intended. Yeah. So thank you so much for calling me and giving me this opportunity to share. I really appreciate all the inputs, and I've taken notes for myself too. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you, Ruo-Mei. Good seeing you again.
Yeah, and sorry, just a bit I wanted to sort of connect on. Just lastly, you mentioned about like doing the things that you do right now that excite you in that sense. And I think that that's resonates absolutely with across the members, regardless of the season they're in, because people have made a conscious decision to say, I love something, I'm passionate about something, I believe I can help add value in some way, which is maybe different to the typical path in that sense. So I think you have to have that passion, that excitement about it, and that applies across life, you know, regardless of working. So yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. I think that was a great way to wrap up the session.
And maybe
Thank you.
wrap up with the final analogy to build upon what Janet was sharing. Thank you
Sure.
so much for sharing that. This is the image of big rocks first. You know, that literally imagining if you put in all the small rocks and then put in the big rocks, it's not going to fit. But kind of deciding, what are your big rocks? Is it relationships, like Janet was sharing? Is it family time? Is it time to exercise? Is it time to get away and be quiet? What are those big rocks? Is it protected time on Sunday, for example? Right? So those big rocks and everything else flows around that rather than the other way around. So I thought that might be, maybe that's aligned with that final question we didn't get to answer at length about self-care as well. Figuring out your big rocks, putting them first because you are worth protecting and maintaining and asserting that boundary. So you can continue doing what excites you, what you are passionate about for the long term, and thrive professionally and also personally. Jamie, you are still on mute, I think. So it was, think you look like you sound like you're
Sorry,
about
that classic Zoom scenario, right? Where it's like, am I on mute or not? Sorry, I was just going to share your profile as well so people can find you, because it'd be good, you know, for others who want to continue on that conversation as well, because I think there's obviously far more. There's, you know, you can go very detailed and of course go into very unique scenarios and journeys and things like that as well. So for those who are on the call who are interested in connecting further, Ruo-Mei, here's her profile, so you can find her on there, and maybe you're the next person who can be smiled up in that sense as well. So absolutely, we really appreciate you coming on today, Ruo-Mei. So thank you very much for sharing your
yeah,
insights.
very, very warmly appreciate it. And if you go to my profile, just go to the 3 dots on the right and then press connect. Don't just follow, I'd love to connect with you directly. Yeah, and
we're
maybe
already connected, so you can't see it there, but it would be there. Yeah.
perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. I know we've overrun a bit, but thank you for all your insights. I wish we could hear from more of you, but we'll continue this conversation another time in one way or another. But I wanted to thank you, Jamie, Yasas, Heather, a shout out as well for inviting me on. Thank you so much, everyone, for just honoring that, holding that space for one another here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
See you all. Thank you.